mess with you there. All right, our next presenter is Fred Baltz. Baltz. Did I say that correctly?
Baltz.
Baltz, thank you. I'm sorry. Dr. Frederick Baltz is a pastor emeritus at St. Matthew Lutheran Church in Glenea, Illinois, and an author of books and articles on biblical history and astronomy. His works include The Exodus Found in 2020, which dates the Exodus using astronomy, and When the Bible Meets the Sky in 2021, exploring the Star of Bethlehem. He appeared in the Red Sea Miracle Part 2 and contributed to the Patterns of Evidence. Dr. Baltz has presented at the international conferences on the Shroud of Turin. He lives in Glenea and with his wife Cindy and has 4 children and 7 grandchildren. If you will please help me to welcome Fred Baltz. All right, trying to get my papers out of your way.
Thank you. I've been a pastor for a long time, and this is not the way I do things. I mean, I always like to get out here away from the podium, and I don't have any papers with me. But due to the nature of what we're doing now, so that I don't leave out any references, and so that I stay within the time limits, I'm gonna do things the hard way, and I'm going to present this to you from my manuscript today. I thank you for all for being here, and I want to thank Joe Marino for his kind invitation to participate in this conference with all of you. He heard a Patterns of Evidence podcast in which I spoke briefly of what I'm about to share with you now in more detail. So on the basis of that experience, he invited me here, and now I invite you, the world's most avid, accomplished, and respected students of the Shroud of Turin and the Sudarium of Oviedo, to consider what Peter and the disciple Jesus loved saw when they reached Jesus' tomb early on the day after the Sabbath, according to the 20th chapter of the Gospel of John, probably April 5th, 33 A.D., after sunrise, which began that day at 5:46 a.m. But don't we already know that? Are there not many translations of the Gospel's original Koine Greek that make it clear? Don't they all say basically the same thing? Were not the linen athania seen lying in the tomb? And was not the face cloth visible somewhere else, apart from the main burial cloth, rolled or folded? Let me caution you about the Greek of this passage. The highly respected expert on the Gospel of John, Father Raymond E. Brown, wrote of this particular passage, quote, "Almost every word must be considered," end quote. And that's from his Anchor Bible commentary, The Gospel According to St. John. This is true, even as even the layperson unfamiliar with the biblical languages will soon see. The terms, the absence of punctuation in the Greek text, Greek grammatical cases, gospel themes, and the fact that there is nothing else like this scene in history so that we can compare the descriptions, they all contribute to the complexity of this subject. And a further word of caution. What I am about to offer you is the proposal to consider a somewhat different translation of this text. John 20, verses 4 through 9. I do not and cannot assert that the John 20 text must be understood according to my proposed translation. We must always use caution so that we do not claim more than we rightly can, or bend the biblical evidence to fit our desired conclusions. I will also tell you now that my proposal involves a chin band, and I cannot guarantee that a chin band was used in the burial of Jesus. None is specifically mentioned in the text in reference to Jesus, though a chin band is found in the story of Lazarus in chapter 11 of the same gospel. The shroud shows a space separating the frontal and dorsal images, which some have taken to be the result of a chin band. That is, a cloth tied around the head from the crown to below the chin in order to hold the mouth closed. The lighter areas beside the face also suggest a chin band, and the beard appears to be pushed forward below the chin in the opinion of some. I will suggest that the face cloth, the Sudarium, was used as that chin band. I am offering this proposal for further discussion and study without being able to prove that it is correct. Of course, if I did not believe my proposal had merit, I wouldn't be here. I'm not alone in proposing a different translation from the standard ones with which we are familiar. In 1966, R. Baltz proposed a similar idea. I have the title of that. If anyone's interested, I have French titles and a Spanish title, I think, of another article. But if anyone would like that, please see me afterward. But others have similar, differing from standard proposals, including E.G. Auer and C. Laverne. R.E. Brown, whom I have already mentioned, does not deny the possibility of a translation like Baltz, and by extension, my own, the one that I will propose. So with all this understood, let's move forward now. I realize that most of you probably have little or no familiarity with Koine Greek, the language of the New Testament. So I will first present the text as found in the English Standard Version of the Bible, John 20, verses 4 through 9, and then I will comment on the Greek terms in the original text, as well as other issues that apply. I will be relying heavily on a Greek-English lexicon of the New Testament and other early Christian literature edited by Bauer, Arndt, and Gingrich. And all of us pastors and others who have studied Greek, we just refer to that as BAG, Bauer, Arndt, Gingrich. Everybody who studied Greek knows that it's like this thick. You know what I'm talking about. Both of them were running together. But the other disciple outran Peter and reached the tomb first. Here is what happened in the gospel immediately before our text. Mary Magdalene has discovered that the body of Jesus is not in the tomb where it had been left by Joseph of Arimathea and Nicodemus 2 days earlier. She has gone to Peter, and the person only known in this gospel as the disciple Jesus loved. His identity is in itself a fascinating subject. Candidates for the beloved disciple put forward by various serious scholars include Thomas, John the son of Zebedee, James the brother of Jesus, and Lazarus. We will have to set that matter aside now and simply refer to him as John, as does early church tradition. But that does not require that he is John the son of Zebedee, as the later church tradition says. Some believe he was another disciple of Jesus, known as John the Elder, not one of the 12. Whoever he was, the beloved disciple is the author of the gospel, an eyewitness to at least some of its events, and the leader of the Christian community for whom the gospel was first written. On Easter morning, this disciple and Peter ran toward the tomb because of Mary Magdalene's report. John reached the tomb first. Here we encounter a feature of the gospel that scholars have long recognized. John is compared with Peter in various ways, and John, he emerges more favorably. Here, he reaches the tomb before Peter. Earlier at the supper, he reclined against Jesus' side, with Peter apparently across the table, making hand signals to John, so John will ask Jesus who is going to betray him. John will be present at the cross, though Peter has fled in the garden. John will be the first to recognize that Jesus has risen, while Peter does not understand yet the significance of what they have both seen together in the tomb. Later at the Sea of Galilee, when the risen Jesus appears on the shore, John will be the one to recognize it is the Lord. And stooping to look in, he saw the linen cloths lying there, but he did not go in. John did not go in the tomb. We are not told why. It has been suggested that he was a priest. In fact, Bishop Polycrates of Ephesus wrote in the 2nd century that John, who reclined against the Lord's breast, was buried there at Ephesus, and that he had been a teacher, a witness, and a priest who wore the petalon. The petalon was the golden plate worn on the turban of none but the high priest of Israel. This too is a subject we cannot go into now, but we can see why concerns for maintaining Levitical purity might have caused John to remain outside the tomb. It is clear from the rabbinic literature that entering the tomb would have made him unclean, priest or not. Perhaps that's the reason, perhaps not. He did not enter, but he looked in after stooping down. Here is a drawing of a new tomb from the Second Temple period by another highly respected person, Lean Rittmeyer, archaeological architect. And I just have to tell you, there can't be very many of them around. Archaeological architects. He shows a body wrapped in a manner characteristic of Egyptian mummies. It is highly unlikely that Jesus was wrapped this way in the manner of the Egyptians. For more on this, see the fine article by Diana Fulbright, A Clean Cloth, what Greek word usage tells us about the burial wrappings of Jesus. That was written in 2005. But it's Rittmeyer's archaeological expertise that concerns us here, seen in the structure of a newly cut tomb. You will notice from the drawing that a body resting on the right bench instead of the back bench, with the feet toward the back of the tomb and the head toward the front of the tomb, would be situated so that the head area was not visible to someone only looking in through the door from outside, as John did at first. So this could explain why John saw only an aggregate of linen lying there. Whatever was near the head area was beyond the sight line. This was brought to our attention by Molly Whitaker in Jews and Christians, Greco-Roman Views, Cambridge University Press, 1984. You will also notice that there was really not another place in such a tomb specifically for objects of importance to the deceased. Such items were commonly placed with the deceased, but not in another place, as many translations say of the location of the Sudarium. Then Simon Peter came following him and went into the tomb. He saw, and the Greek term, the verb there is theore, the linen cloths, athania, lying there, kamena. Simon Peter finds no reason to remain outside the tomb, even if it means becoming defiled in Levitical terms, and he enters. He sees more than John did. The word used here is theore. This gospel has already masterfully shown us that seeing truth is an ability some have and others do not. Think only of the man born blind in chapter 9, who acknowledges that Jesus is from God when Jesus restores his physical sight. Jesus' opponents, knowing that the man's sight has been restored by Jesus and perfectly able to see with their own eyes, stubbornly remain blind to the truth about Jesus and continue their refusal to believe in him. Seeing is very important thematically in the gospel, and we must remember that. Theore carries a sense of beholding. Now, if I place my hand inside my coat, now here in your presence, you can no longer see my hand, but you can behold that my hand is inside my coat. You can behold my hand. Think of theore as a kind of perceiving related to, but not necessarily identical to, seeing with the eyes. The athania in which Jesus was buried were there within the tomb. Some commentators believe the participle kamena means resting in an undisturbed manner. That is, flat, peaceful looking, unmoved, unruffled. And this would be in contrast to what one might expect to find due to the malicious activity of grave robbers or tomb violators. Even a friendly person, such as a gardener, who may have moved the body, would not have left behind the burial cloths like this for any imaginable reason. Others take kamena to mean simply that the athania were there. They were present. In the article previously mentioned, A Clean Cloth, Diana Fulbright helps us realize that authane, the Greek word authane, refers to a large cloth, and that even the diminutive form, athania, usually refers to something large and not small. So we might conclude from this and from the accounts of Jesus' burial in the Synoptic Gospels that Jesus was buried within a long shroud folded over the body at the head. This cloth is what the Synoptic Gospels refer to as the sindone. This large cloth and any smaller cloth ties around it would constitute the athania. Remember that John is familiar with the burial customs of the Jews. He cites them in chapter 19, verse 40. He also tells us that the myrrh and aloes brought by Nicodemus were bound within the burial cloths. That's in 1940. The presence of the myrrh and aloes inside the large cloth could not have been overlooked because of their large quantity. And the face cloth, to Sudarion in Greek, which had been on epi, Jesus' head, not lying with the linen cloths. We now hear of the face cloth, the Sudarion. It has not been mentioned before in the narrative. We read that it was upon his, that is, Jesus' head. Epi is the preposition used here, meaning upon. In the Lazarus story, the word Sudarion is used of a cloth tied around Lazarus' face. The verb is periadetito, with peri being the relevant preposition there within the verb, meaning around. So epi is on, peri is around. Is the Sudarium epites kaphiles, that is upon his head in chapter 20, meant to be understood as different in its configuration from the Sudarion wrapped around Lazarus' face in chapter 11? Does epi mean that the Sudarium had been over Jesus' head earlier on the cross? Although nothing about that is mentioned in the gospel, and therefore the preposition epi belongs to that earlier scene. The presence of a cloth to cover the face of a person who dies violently can be assumed, even though the gospel does not specifically tell of it. Or does epi really mean that the Sudarion had been on Jesus' head in some way in the tomb, but not wrapped around his face, as was the case with Lazarus? Well, clearly John is comparing the scene at the raising of Lazarus with the scene at the empty tomb of Jesus. We can find no reason to suppose that John's description of the cloth tied around Jesus' face is meant to be understood as different in its configuration from the cloth on Jesus' head. In other words, John means to say that Jesus had a Sudarium tied around his face also. Even if Jesus' Sudarion had been placed over his face prior to this at the cross, a reader already familiar with chapter 11 would expect that some cloth was wrapped around Jesus' face, just as was the case with Lazarus. And that even though the words change from around his face, that's Lazarus, in chapter 11, to upon his head, here in chapter 20, there is really no intended difference in what is being described. This would then be two ways to say the same thing. This would mean that whatever may have been its use at the cross, the Sudarium had now been placed on Jesus' head as a chin band in the tomb. Lazarus will die again, and Jesus will not. Jesus' parting words to Lazarus' friends were, "Untie him and let him go," in chapter 11:44. Jesus will need no such assistance. Lazarus prepares us for what we will soon see with respect to Jesus in the gospel, and this is intentional, of course. It is what we call foreshadowing. Foreshadowing requires a certain continuity between what has already happened and what will happen later. The cloth that was upon his head, whether upon his head refers to its earlier use at the cross to cover his face, according to Jewish custom, or whether it refers to its placement on Jesus' head in the tomb, may be and should be understood to have become a chin band, as in the Lazarus story. And this is what I am proposing to you. Now, this raises a very important question. Why would a face cloth that had been used at the cross to cover Jesus' head post-mortem later be wrapped around Jesus' face and therefore located inside the large cloth with its smaller ties, the athania? If a chin band was important for burial, why would not Joseph of Arimathea and Nicodemus have used a pristine new cloth for that purpose? The answer is blood. If this cloth held any of Jesus' blood, and it is unimaginable that it did not if it touched his face at all, it would surely have been buried with him for the day of resurrection. Blood was considered an essential part of any living thing, including the human being. The life is in the blood. Leviticus 17:11, for the life of the flesh is in the blood, and I have given it for you on the altar to make atonement for your souls. For it is the blood that makes atonement by the life. It was a matter of faith that the blood would be resurrected with the flesh on the last day. This was the belief of the Pharisees. If the blood of an individual fell onto the ground when the person died, even that bloody soil should be gathered and, if possible, interred with the deceased. Even today, Jews do not embalm the dead for several reasons, one of them being that the blood is drained in embalming, and the blood should remain within the body. The thought of a cloth that wiped blood from the skin of a person who had died to then be discarded would have been unthinkable. If this same Sudarion had been used to cover Jesus' face at the cross, then to reuse this blood-stained cloth as a chin band, rather than use a new cloth, makes sense. The shed blood would this way be placed as near as possible to the face from which it had flowed. This would have required folding it or rolling it into a loop to be tied or pinned around the face of the victim. I'm going to just step away for a second. I was a Boy Scout, and we had neckerchiefs. They were approximately the size of the Sudarium. We always used to twirl those around and then put them on. I mean, when it says rolled up, that's the first thing that comes to my mind. But rolled or folded, this is what I am suggesting. But Allah, the Greek word, folded up in a place, eis henatopon, by itself, chorus. John saw the face cloth which Peter did not see. Or did he? Because of how this passage has been translated in our Bibles, we're inclined to think Peter saw the face cloth in a different location from the Athania. Separate, the word is chorus, in a place by itself, eis henatopon. But we must ask what the ou really negates. Brown does so. The ou may be understood to mean that the face cloth was spatially distant from the Athania, that is, not with them, not close to them. But the ou may negate seeing, beholding. That would mean instead that Peter did not behold the face cloth as he beheld the Athania because it could not be seen. In other words, the ou may refer to the visibility of the Sudarium rather than to its location. It was separate from sight, in other words. Allah means but. It's the stronger word for that. The other is de. The contrast here between where the Sudarium was beheld to be, in contrast to where else it might have been in the tomb, is surprising enough to warrant the stronger word, Allah. Chorus has the general meaning of a part, but its many uses are far-ranging, as the Greek lexicon shows. I propose that in this context, apart from what could be seen is the meaning of chorus. Apart from what could be seen, or out of sight. Eis henatopon is literally into one place. This is an idiom, and idioms cannot be translated strictly word for word. They're expressions. So here again, the lexicons show us numerous uses of the expression found in ancient literature. Among these other meanings are in one and the same place, in its own place, in a place by itself. If John is telling us that the Sudarion was in one and the same place with the Athania, that would mean that it was either within or beneath the Athania. Then the other disciple who had reached the tomb first also went in, and he saw Aden and believed. We cannot avoid the conclusion that what John saw in the tomb was revelatory. He believed on the basis of what he saw. This cannot mean that John saw the Athania and the Sudarion and simply believed only what Mary Magdalene had said, that someone had taken the body. No, clearly this means John believed that Jesus was living. The word used of John when he saw the tomb's interior is Aden, not Theare, as we saw before. So this suggests that John saw in a way Peter had not seen yet. John saw through to the truth. Ian Wilson wrote of this moment, "This was, after all, the pivotal birth moment of the entire religion we call Christianity." And friends, think about that. We have the most complete timetable, the most complete schedule of what happened on that Easter morning in the Gospel of John. So Mary Magdalene has come, but Jesus hasn't appeared to her yet. So she hasn't believed in the resurrection yet. That's still off in the future. This is the first time, the first instant, the first moment that someone has believed in the resurrection of Jesus Christ and believed on the basis of some grave cloths. A Sudarium, simply present in another location within the tomb, perhaps just where it had been left before at the burial time, has to me no imaginable revelatory significance. But a Sudarium which had become a chinband, apart from view because it was still within the resting Athania, discernible from its rolled up loop form under the larger cloth, in one and the same place it had been before, points to a disappearance of the body of Jesus that did not require him to be untied in contrast to Lazarus. The appearance of the resting Athania to John with the Sudarion inside indicated to John that Jesus had passed through them. Now this transcending of physical barriers continues almost immediately, so this is thematic again. Later that same day in the Gospel, Jesus appears to his disciples in a room where the door is locked. 8 days later, it will happen again. Verse 9, "For as yet they did not understand the scripture that he must rise from the dead." Neither John or Peter had previously understood that the resurrection of Jesus was already to be found in the prophets. That would soon change. But John saw through to the truth already due to the revelatory nature of what he saw within Jesus' tomb. Now let's focus on verses 6 and 7 in light of what we've seen. And I'm going to propose the following translation as both possible and I would say preferable. "Then Simon Peter came following him and entered the tomb, and he beheld the linen cloths lying, and also that the cloth which had been upon his head was not visible with the linen cloths, but instead, apart from view, rolled up where it was at first, or in one and the same place." A second, basically equivalent translation is possible, with to Sudarion taken as in nominative case instead of accusative case to begin a new sentence. The Greek has no punctuation. Oh, I have to go back. Yes, there.
Can you go back to the previous slide for 1 second? Why is there no, the parentheses after place, what's the front of where that should be? See that same place,
You have a closed parenthesis, but
Right.
not an open.
Right.
I'm not.
You have a closed parenthesis, not an open parenthesis.
Right at the very end.
Oh, at the end.
Where's the front?
Oh. That. I think that's in my text, but I think it didn't make it to the screen.
Probably where the comma goes.
Oh, yeah. In making my iterations of this, I didn't update that. That should read. Apart from view, rolled up where it was at first. And then there should be a parenthesis that says or in one and the same place. Sorry about that confusion.
So you're also missing the word or.
Yeah, let me.
We can hold questions to the
I'm sorry.
questions.
Yeah, I can try to maybe fix that.
Good catch.
Yeah, you can't believe how many times I read this so that wouldn't happen, but it did. Okay,
That's the other page, what we see on the screen.
I've got a script and in changing things that didn't follow what I have here. Yeah, so then anyway, this is the other one, and what's different here? If you look at verse 7, I started the sentence there because the Sudarion, the face cloth, the form of it in the Greek it's an accusative form, but it's also a nominative form. So it can be a direct object or it can be the start of a new sentence. Basically the same thing. It's the same idea in both of these. So, I'm saying that John 20, 4 through 9, so that's not to be a 3, we can make it a 3, may be translated in such a way as to agree with a fall-through shroud scenario, and with the Sudarium used as a chin band which remained observable within the folded shroud. It has been said that a theory is judged by the questions it answers. This theory, I think, has some things in its favor. First and most important, this translation of the text explains why the scene in the tomb was revelatory for John. We can easily understand how empty burial clothes with the outline of another cloth inside them would signal that the body had passed through them. And I want to just say, even if they didn't see that outline of the Sudarion, they would have found it later, although I like to think that they saw the contour of it. This translation proposed here turns out to be consistent with Shroud and Sudarium studies thus far. The translation I have proposed does not actually contest anything that's been established about the Shroud of the Sudarium, I don't believe, but rather offers another way to understand the essential biblical foundation. Though researchers of the Sudarium have proposed that the description of the rolled up cloth refers to its knotted form within the tomb, knotted to be like a cap that went over Jesus' head. This is different from what I am proposing. That's not essential for the Sudarium to be genuine. I'm not suggesting that any of the other work, the laboratory work, is wrong or inaccurate. But I'm suggesting that at that point, what they saw in the tomb is different from what we might have thought on the basis of the knot that clearly was in the Sudarium at one point. An observer of the Sudarium will notice creases that run from left to right and could have resulted from its use as a chin band, I would think, even though the knotted configuration of the cloth at the cross seems to be established by multiple trials in the laboratory setting. Might this way to think of the placement of the cloths in the tomb have more to suggest about radiocarbon dating? Might a rolled up cloth respond to a horizontal energy burst differently from a flat, unfolded cloth, with the result that re-enrichment of C14 in each cloth would give different ages for each cloth? People in their different disciplines, I would ask them to ask these questions, and you alone can answer them, not me. But again, John 20, 4 through 9, may be translated in such a way as to agree with a fall-through shroud scenario and with the Sudarium used as a chin band, which remained observable within the folded, empty cloth. Thank you. Thank you.
All right, questions?
This is fascinating. I thank you for the presentation. I'm wondering if you know if there's any blood pattern on the Sudarium that's been found that would support your theory.
I'm not aware of that, and I guess I wouldn't expect anybody to have looked at that particular possibility, because I don't know how many people this idea has occurred to. I'm really in a minority, I know that for sure, but I do think, again, that this has merit. I have looked at the pictures of the Sudarium myself. Our church happens to own, from Barry Schwartz, a full-size color photo of that. And I've studied it, and I don't see any results of that. But then, I mean, I know thousands of hours have been devoted to the study of the Sudarium. And if I were to devote thousands of hours, maybe I would find something, I don't know. But I did, in my study, I did see those lines going crossways, the length of the Sudarium, and I thought maybe that's evidence. Maybe that's evidence. Yes, Professor.
Hi. When I was a test engineer, I used to test things. Then, while a presentation with an audience that was interested in the shroud, I presented a model of the shroud at small scale and a statue, a volumetric image of the body, and I placed the body on the shroud and covered it with the other part. And at that moment, I turned off the light of the room. And while the people don't see what I be doing, I remove the body and put a cloth, a chin band, between the two halves of the shroud. Then I turn on the light, and the people who they see. Nobody say nothing about something inside the cloth, because the cloth, the chin band, is not possible to see it. I think even the cloth inside the shroud is not possible to see it, less is possible to say the shape of the chin or the cloth. It is wrapped. It's not possible to say the shape inside the cloth, the shroud. This is the result of an test.
Are you saying that it would be impossible to see the cloth, but it might be possible to see the shape of the cloth? Did I understand that correctly?
It's not possible to see the shape inside.
Okay.
But only maybe you can see a small heel inside. It's
that's
the
what
only thing you can see.
That's what I'm suggesting, is even just that. But I would have to add, our church has a copy of the shroud, and I've done some traveling with it. And so when I do my presentations, I have that on a stand. And then I have on a table, I've put a full-size piece of cloth like the shroud. And I did also on my own, in my experiment, it did work. They could see the shape. So I don't know what the difference might be, but another thing to bear in mind, and I don't know as much about the Sudarium as I do about the shroud, but I believe that there has been a stiffness to the Sudarium due to the blood, due to the blood serum, and just due to dirt. So that's why the lines, the wrinkles from the knot, for instance, show up. That's why so many things show up. And that too, if that were around Jesus' face, and if that were stiffened by the various things that were in it, that would contribute, I would think, to a perceptible shape under the top of the shroud. Yes. Back row, Larry?
Yeah, thank you for your presentation. On the comment that you couldn't think of any revelatory purpose of the Sudarium being folded instead of apart, so if I understood correctly. One purpose I thought that it might be folded up and set aside is this is John's way of affirming the authenticity of the Sudarium, that the Johannine community was aware of not only the existence of what we call the Shroud of Turin, but they also were aware of the Sudarium that we call the Sudarium of Oviedo. And this is the author's way of giving his stamp of authenticity, of saying, hey, yeah, that face cloth was folded up, separate, apart from the others, and it's the real thing. Just a thought.
You showed a short a slide that showed an excavation of other bodies that were wrapped in a shroud or covered with a shroud from about the same time. So does that mean that linen cloth would have survived? I mean, how long, is it unusual that it has survived over 2,000 years?
Yeah, that cloth was from excavations at Givat HaMivtar in the Jerusalem area. And it would be really, really unusual to find a shroud with a cloth intact at all. It'd be very, very rare. That was within the article I cited called A Clean Cloth by Diana Fulbright. And the credit from that, for that picture is from the Biblical Archaeology Society, I believe. I don't know any more about it than that, except where it's from and who took the picture.
That's one of our miracles, that the shroud has survived, that linen itself has survived that long?
Well, the reason that the other shrouds would not have survived is because that they were right next to a corpse. So the shroud, of course, is different in that regard. I mean, I showed you the picture of the tomb. The idea there is that when the person dies, if it's a tomb burial, the person is buried in the tomb, and then 1 year later, the family comes back, because by then the flesh is decayed, and then the bones are gathered and they're placed into a stone box, a stone chest called an ossuary, and that goes into a niche farther back in the tomb. And the slide that you saw was the new tomb. This is when they first start using it, but as time goes on and there are more deaths in the family, they enlarge the tomb. They cut back farther in and have more of the places for the ossuaries to be placed. So the idea of the shroud is not to continue. It's not to last. It's to just cover the body for that first year. Yes, sir.
When the other disciple went in and said he saw and believed, is there a possibility that he saw the image and believed based on that?
I kind of doubt it.
I know the image is on the inside of the cloth.
Yeah, see, that's...
But, could they maybe roll it back or something? I don't know, but
yeah.
I'm thinking the image would be proof that he rose through it.
And that would also mean that the image was there instantly and not something that was a little bit of time in the developing. So I don't know, I mean, I can't answer your question, but it's good to think about.
Just,
Yes, sir.
I've heard, I don't know if it's true, in ancient Jewish customs, if there was a fairly wealthy family, you would have servants, and the, father would sit there and eat his dinner. They would stand off on the side, nice and quiet. And if he was done eating, he would take the napkin, wipe his mouth, and throw it on the plate. And that was a sign to, you can take my plate away.
Yeah.
But let's say they're eating, there's a knock at the door, it's a friend, neighbor, business partner, they need to have a short conversation. He would fold up the napkin and put it beside the plate. And that was a code to the servants, don't touch my plate, I'm coming back. So part of the significance of the other cloth being folded up and set aside by itself could be a clue to the meal practice, which means I'm coming back.
I've heard of that. I've searched all over the internet for the source for it. And I and one other person that I looked at this to explore, I've not been able to come up with any trace of tradition behind that. I know it's out there because I see it a lot.
And I heard it, that's why I said, I don't know if it's true.
And if anybody does know that it's true, please tell me. If you know where that's to be found in rabbinic literature, I would love to know.
We'll have to leave it at that. Let's give a round of applause to Dr. Great presentation.